Hey guys, here. Thanks for clicking and listening along again this week to a bonus episode of the Sunday Sitdown podcast. And it's my favorite one ever. There, I said it. We've talked to a lot of people, but there's none bigger than this because it's my dad, Bill Geist. Many of you know him from his 31 years on CBS News on another show that came on Sunday mornings, and I'm told still does from time to time. Maybe you know him from his books, from his column in the New York Times, or if you're really old school, I'm talking 1970s old school, you know his column in the Suburban Trib in Chicago. He's got a new book out right now. It's called Lake of the Ozarks. It's a memoir of his high school and college years working at his Uncle Ed's Arrowhead Lodge at Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri. These are stories I've been hearing about literally all my life, and my dad now, since he retired from CBS last year, finally had time to sit down and write them. And I have to say, I'm a little biased. It is absolutely hysterically nice and glorious. Going down to work at the lake as a teenager, and he found that when he got to Uncle Ed's Arrowhead Lodge, his first job was to go out and rake over the septic field behind the lodge. A lot of that, a lot of great stuff. And so fun just for me on a personal level to get to sit down for my dad. We're sitting in the living room of his house. A lot of you know as well that he's been battling Parkinson's disease for the last 27 years. He's been doing national television pieces, bravely going out traveling the country with his Parkinson's. And I'm just so proud that he sat down and wrote this book that he's been thinking about and wanting to write for my entire life, more than 40 years, and it's here now. The book is called Lake of the Ozarks, and here right now, my gosh, I can't believe I'm saying it, on the Sunday Sit Down podcast, my dad, Bill Geist. Thanks for having me over.
Happy to have you home.
Is it weird to have all the cameras back in your house?
Yes,
like
it
in
is.
the old days?
It's very weird. I typed back to when you used to be eating breakfast and there'd be a camera crew in the kitchen shooting something. I think it's why you're at ease around the cameras.
It just became part of our lives. You'd come down for school and there'd be a setup like this with lights and audio guys, photographers and everything else.
Exactly, yeah.
Can you believe it's here?
No, I can't.
How long did this take?
Well, I typed very slowly. I typed 10 to 15 words a minute. And I also wanted to get it right. So it took about 45 years. Which is not bad for 200.
People are going to think you're joking.
200 pages. No.
It took 45 years.
You showed me the thing from 1987 when I left the New York Times and said I'm leaving to work in TV and to do my book and describe the book, and this was his book. That was 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Well, I was down there taking notes 10 years before that, so it's at least 40 years.
40 years.
And it's 50. Well, the only
It said Bill Geist is leaving the New York Times, and it was specific about this book. He's going to do TV work for CBS, but also to write a book about his years at the Lake of the Ozarks. Yeah, exactly. So here it is.
Well, the only problem with it taking so long is that many of the people have died.
Right.
So they're not going to be able to read it and enjoy it.
You don't have the primary sources. You might have had 40 years ago. All right. So before we get to Lake of the Ozarks, because this story is really about who you became there over all those summers. Tell me about your home life in Champaign, Illinois, what it was like there and who you were.
Well, it was quite different. It was my parents were salt of the earth, hard work people, nose to the grindstone, and not a lot of fun. They were great people, but they were not a lot of fun. And life was a little boring in Champaign. We used to play garage ball and stuff in the middle of the summer when we only had 2 kids to play baseball. And so there wasn't a lot. They were just as happy. Said, why don't you come down, work at my resort? Bing, ding, ding, ding. It was like the resort. It sounded great. You know, it sounds really like a lot of fun. And we thought it was going to be terrific. I even got a friend to go with me.
And so this started when? In high school?
Yeah. The high school and college. The summers of high school and college. But 7 summers.
And what did your mom and dad say when you said, I'm going to go spend the summer with Uncle Ed at the lodge?
They didn't look disappointed.
Really?
I think they were just as happy to get me out of there as I was to get out of town.
Did they know all that it meant to be with Uncle Ed?
I think they did. They'd been around him for a while, and they knew him. He was a colonel in World War II, and he came home a year late because he was having so much fun at his place in London and Paris. So he was kind of a playboy, crazy guy. and he would come and visit us. And I remember I have an image of him coming in the front door for Christmas time, flipping silver dollars in the air. My brother and I are diving for the silver dollars so he'd get him shot. He was like born to be a big shot in a small pond down there.
And that comes back in a minute. We'll see that again at the Lake of the Ozarks, the flipping the coins to people as he walks into the bank. Is it fair to say that in Champaign you were funny, but you didn't really have an outlet, or maybe that your sense of humor wasn't as appreciated around the dining room table as it was at the lake?
The dining room table, my dad once said to me, "Do you say everything that comes to your mind?" Oh, boy, this is going to be tough. And then at school, I'd go to school and I'd wind up sitting out in the hall or down in the principal's office. And so it wasn't exactly appreciated, no.
And your dad and Uncle Ed couldn't have been more different.
Completely different.
Your dad's a print shop teacher.
My dad was horrified by some Uncle Ed story. Uncle Ed would talk about writing off his clothes and his cabin cruiser and all that. My dad would sit there and I could just see him. I think he was getting incensed by all this. Like, he's not a regular salt of the earth, middle American like the rest of us.
That Uncle Ed wasn't that.
Yeah, no,
right?
Not at all.
So your dad believed in just things by the book.
Yeah, he was a good man.
Way.
He went to work every day, brought home his paycheck, put it on the table. And he was great, but he was strictly by the book. He would play the piano. He played the piano. He used to play the piano with his eyes closed. Or he'd go down to his dark room. He had a dark room in the basement with the door closed. I think he was safely away from all of us. And I think he was a high school teacher.
Right.
And I think he was glad after chasing kids around all day to be home and away from kids. So
there's a great scene in the book, and you talked about it before, where your dad's down in the dark room and you don't know what's going on the other side of the door, and all you hear is jazz coming out.
He'd play it on the radio, the jazz shows from high atop some hotel in Chicago, and he'd be listening to them, and we'd hear those as we go by. But we weren't allowed to go in because we'd ruin all his his printing and picture.
And as you say, he might have liked it that way. So you're in high school, so we're talking about early 60s?
It was mainly the
first time
60s,
down?
mainly the 60s, yeah, like 60 and 7 years.
So what were you like the first summer, 15 years old, 16, something like
15,
that?
Yeah.
And what do you remember about your first time seeing the lake?
Well, we thought it was going to, my friend and I thought it was going to be like speedboats and girls in bikinis and being a lifeguard, whatever, having a really great life and wild. And I got down there and they gave us a couple of shovels and some boots and pointed us out to the open air septic system where the water was collecting on the surface and we had to wade in and churn the sand so it would seep in. I said, where are the girls in bikinis? When does the nepotism with my uncle kick in? But that was a rude awakening. And then in the afternoon, we'd haul dirty laundry out to the trucks. And then at night, we'd put laying out there. But on some nights, when the Chef Glenn, we'd walk by the pool and we'd notice he was laid out by the pool.
Had a few too many to drink.
He had a lot to drink every day. And some days it was just too much. He couldn't make it back to the kitchen. So he'd be laid out like at a funeral home with his hands crossed over his chest and laying out there by the swimming pool. And so some days we knew when we saw that, we knew we were going to have to do some cooking.
Yeah.
Which Weezer, my friend, he had asthma and very sensitively, his friends called him Weezer. So we'd go in and cook, and it was just a madhouse. The steaks would come out looking like pieces of charcoal. And
did you have any experience cooking prior to running that kitchen?
Weezer had worked morning. He knew how to cook an egg. He couldn't flip one over, but he could cook an egg. And I couldn't do anything. I'd had Kraft macaroni and cheese my whole life.
So how does that work? You're out by the pool during the day. You see the cook passed out because he's had a bunch of beer or scotch or whatever.
Yeah.
And Uncle Ed says, "Billy, you're in. Go cook."
Yeah. Well,
with no training.
One of his associates, my uncle's associate, gets talked directly to my uncle.
And so you're expected to somehow know how to cook everything on that menu.
I don't think there was a lot of thinking involved in it. It'd be like Saturday night in August. There'd be 250 people coming in for dinner. And we were back there just going wild, just being totally driven out of our mind.
Just churn it out.
Just churn it out.
Did you get some complaints? Any food sent back?
We did have, a number of things sent back. A lot of them said, this isn't my order. It can't be. It doesn't look anything like what I ordered. I thought it was going to look like.
I guess if you get a pile of charcoal when you order the T-bone, you might say that.
I wanted the steak on top of the charcoal, not the charcoal itself. So, yeah, we got a lot of complaints. And one of the waitresses was always said, we made it, but I don't think we got any repeat customers. No repeat customers.
You referenced it at the beginning of your answer, but we have to go back and really talk about the chili pond. Mm-hmm. Because as long as I have memories in our family, the chili pond has been right up near the top. And that is the septic field.
Yeah.
And the term chili pond is so descriptive, isn't it?
It is. It makes you sick when you think about it.
There's a visual to it.
Yeah, it's. They called it a day at the beach. So you're going to the beach today. That was not a good.
So it was a big, like, open air
40
pit.
by 40 sand pit with pipes coming.
Everything dumped out
dumping stuff into the sand pit.
And you had to go kind of
You turn it over so it would seep in.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
That was not good.
Did you have protective?
No, they didn't have protective anything back then.
You put like a bandana over your face
No, we
or
weren't
something?
into protection. That was considered unmanly to go to the chili pond. To get tipped.
Hot Missouri summer day.
Yeah.
You're out there on the beach with it sort of festering up.
Yeah.
Welcome to the lake.
That's it. Well, welcome to resort life.
You were also a bellhop.
I was.
At Arrowhead Lodge.
I was. I should explain one thing. When we worked outside, we made $5 a day plus room and board. When we were promoted to bellhop, they cut our pay to $1 a day because you were able to get tips from people, and that was in theory, because the Ozarkians weren't real hip to tipping scene.
Right.
And you'd reach for a suitcase, and some farmer from Versailles, Missouri, would be holding his suitcase, and you reach for it to grab it and take it for him, and it was like taking a sword out of a stone. It was like the old King Arthur thing. And what I said was, always take change for a quarter, because you're likely to get a dime as a tip.
So it didn't add up to $5 an hour at the end of the day.
No.
$5 a day.
No, you never quite made it back to that guaranteed safety net, $5 a day.
And this was pre-minimum wage, obviously.
Yeah.
Or maybe there was one. It wasn't observed at the lake.
I think Uncle Ed would be in jail if he did to us what can be done these days. There were no time clocks, no modernity at all, no workers' rights.
Yeah.
No such thing.
You talked too about the garden rooms as you show people different parts of the hotel and where they could stay. What were the garden rooms?
That was a euphemism. Mm-hmm. The garden rooms were downstairs, and my uncle expected the bellhops to sell the rooms. Like when somebody came in and wanted to see a room, you sold it to them.
Right.
You put it on you. We'd call up, you're not full yet, that's your fault. So we'd go down the garden room, and I'd be walking down the hall like the linoleum hallway, and they were kind of slick.
Yeah.
And the woman I'd be showing the room to would say, "Do you smell something?" I'd say, no, I don't. It must be the cleanser they're using or something. What it was they called the garden room because of the green stuff growing in the shower.
And you sold that as sort of a feature of the room?
Yeah, I tried to. And he'd say, "Gee, this is really small." And I'd say, "Well, there are three of you." There were husband and wife and their kid. Three of you. And I'd say, "Well, that's funny you say that." And the beds were about that far apart.
Yeah.
And then the chest of drawers was right next to it. So there was no room to walk around. But I'd say, "That's funny. We had 4 or 5 people stay in this for a month, and they loved it, every minute of it."
And they go, "Okay," and they check in?
No. They'd say, "I'm going to go talk to my husband." You never see him again.
And they go out in the car and tear out the parking lot.
It'd screech out onto the highway.
I also love that it was
a little fan
there, that at least those rooms were kind of underground a little bit, so you'd go sleep in those rooms sometimes?
Yeah, well, when it was hot out, there was a thing called the she shack, which were a cottage where 8 of the waitresses and housekeepers slept, women, and they would go. There was a little fan in there. There was no air conditioning, so it'd get 100 degrees during, obviously, in Missouri in August, and they'd go sleep in one of the bedrooms downstairs, in one of those, the garden room maybe. And then, of course, in the middle of the night, they'd rent the room, and the people would walk in.
Right. They're in the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
But at least it was cool for a little while for you guys.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little more about Uncle Ed and who he was. What did he look like? What did he sound like? Who was this guy?
He was he seemed large. I think in looking back on him, he wasn't that big. He was probably about 6 feet tall, stocky, had a cigar. By the name of Slick back. He always liked me a little bit because I had red hair back then. And he was just a very overbearing kind of guy. I said he colonel in the Army, and he barked more than he talked. He'd like bark orders at you, do things, get things done, yell at people, scare them. Intimidation was a big thing. Although whenever he fired somebody, they just wouldn't leave. So it wasn't real effective being a bully.
You probably forgot that he fired him anyway.
Yeah, by the name. Yeah.
Come back.
He had many scotches every day. He'd get everything in order up at the lodge in the morning, go out on his boat in the afternoon with friends or whatever, and drink scotch all afternoon. And he'd drink scotch when he got up from his nap, and he'd drink scotch at night. He drank a lot of scotch.
It's funny you say he was big, but maybe he wasn't that big, because my memory of him is a huge,
I think of him as
guy.
an bigger, larger than life kind of guy, because he was so loud and such a presence. About this,
and as you say, he was unlike anybody you knew in your life back in Champaign.
Didn't know anybody.
What was it like driving around Lake of the Ozarks, riding shotgun in his big car with him?
Well, he had 2 Cadillacs a year, a convertible in the summer, which I saw. And then so he'd be in a Cadillac convertible. He had another Cadillac hardtop in the winter. We'd be driving down to the bank, and I just remember, I think I've told you about this, how you just feel like you're in a dream. The big tires, you're floating on the road, you're going so smoothly, you're like floating on air. I said, I thought it was kind of how people must get around in heaven, because it was just perfect, the temperature and everything. But then he'd pull into the bank. He always took his bank statement. When he took some money in the bank, he always put a little in his pocket before he put it in the deposit thing. So I guess
something for the big guy.
Sure, yeah, something for myself. And he pulled into the bank parking lot. Clouds of dust with women. He had a cow horn. He'd push a lever on his dashboard, and it would move. So I think he intended to get horns for it too. But so he'd walk in the bank, and he'd just start yelling, "Hello, everybody! How you doing, Jimmy?" The bank president. And every clerk was a beauty. He's called beautiful. It was if they were women, he would flatter them immensely. That was part of his thing. And he was just a big presence wherever he went. He just filled up the room.
Yeah, and he would flip the coins, people, and bring the money in.
Yeah, he'd flip coins at people sometimes down there. I don't think he ever flipped silver dollars like he did back in Champaign. But.
There are also, he was the lead character in this cast. You actually dedicate the book to the cast of Arrowhead characters.
Yeah.
There's so many of them. Annie Hicks is a great character.
You liked Annie?
Yeah, I'm a big Annie fan.
Who was she? Annie was kind of a hillbilly. She was. And she was old, and she'd worked in the kitchen for decades. And she always smoking unfiltered cigarettes. I always picture her making a salad with her arms. She'd get salad up to her arm. She had a cigarette dangling over the top of I don't know if that added anything to the salad or not. It was like grilled salad or something, smoked.
A little ash.
Yeah, a little ash in. I don't know what that adds to it.
That's a secret
But she was a great character, and she ran the place. Glenn was drunk. Mm-hmm. He's the chef.
He's out at the pool.
He's out at the pool, face down at the pool. And she makes the lobsters and the chicken and all that, but she I don't know, her favorite expression was shit fire. Mm-hmm. Shit fire, Glenn. Glenn would go out to California in the winter and work at a diner or something, I don't know. But he'd come back, always had some great idea from California. And one year it was the innovation. One year it was broasted, and Annie wouldn't put up with that. She had no idea what broasted meant. I don't either.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I don't know.
And roasted.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Sounds very California.
Yeah, very California. And then the next year he came back with salad bar. A very innovative, unique, kind of overwhelming change in the restaurant.
But you know, it's funny when you read her take on it. If you never knew what a salad bar was, she's right. It's absurd. She said people are going to get up from the dinner table and go make their own salad. So what are we doing here as waitresses?
Exactly.
And she's right.
She and Glenn got in a big fight over the salad bar. She said, "Do you pay them to make their own salads, or what? They make their own? Why would you go out to dinner and have to do everything yourself?"
Yeah.
So she thought it was crazy, and Glenn was going to go ahead with it. He decided that there was also, you can't have any seconds.
Oh, at the salad bar?
She said, "What do you do if a big?" You had to eats everything at the restaurant at the salad bar, and he said small plates. Use small plates, and then the other thing was you had somebody observing. There'd be a sign up saying
you're under surveillance.
You're under surveillance. Today it'd be you're under surveillance, right? I'm surprised nobody's done that. Maybe they have.
So there was no return to that's the whole justification for the
No, you couldn't go back. No.
Wow.
You had to put it all in one heaping over the sides of a small plate. But they decided they were going to have one of the other, if I may, hillbilly or hill person or whatever, who was a very muscular and big, strong guy who did all the electrical work and heavy lifting at the hotel. He was going to watch the salad bar and enforce the no seconds thing. And my aunt heard about this. She said, "We can't do this." Noble was his name, and he said Noble would take this. He had to put up with it. It made me overreact.
So there was no enforcer.
No enforcer.
The threat of surveillance.
No enforcer. And so my Aunt Janet called it off. She thought somebody'd get killed by taking a second, going for more lettuce, a wedge or something, and So, and she didn't decide to take up too much room, too many tables, and she just didn't. They never did it finally. But Annie had to put up with it.
The wisdom of Annie Hicks. I think she was right about this.
I do too. Now that I think about it, yeah, I thought at the time I thought she makes a lot of sense. Right. I couldn't. It was pretty revolutionary idea to make people get up and get their own salad. Yeah. I've been in places since where out west where you cook your own steak. Yeah. It's like, come on.
This isn't a restaurant. You do this at home. What am I paying for here? The night desk. So there was an overnight shift, obviously.
An overnight shift.
And you'd get some characters coming through.
Pretty sad stories about the area, which were very interesting. You'd tell about this old lady whose house, they had to burn down all the wooden structures and tie back the trees in half so they'd be low enough for the lake. And so this guy would come in and tell these stories how they'd come by and say it's time to go, and they'd burn your house down. So it was a pretty sad, moving thing. But then there was a night desk clerk who was friends with this guy. He was an elderly guy. And I was sitting there one night, and this guy burst in the front door. He's like drunk, yelling, "Is the restaurant open? Is the restaurant open?" And the elderly guy said, "No, it's not. It's been closed for 2 hours." And the guy said, and he ran over, grabbed him by the collar and said, "Now is it open?" And pushed him back, the old guy back, and fell down. And at that point, it just, I came in and asked you. And it sort of took care of the situation. He left. You're encouraged to take justice into your own hands. So I hit him over the head with this, and he kind of crab walked sideways out the front door, stunned. My aunt was mad because she was selling the Buddha statue in the gift shop.
Yeah.
So that was...
She would have rather you picked up something else.
My friend Pete, Uncle Ed, came up and said, "What the hell happened here last night?" And Pete said, "Well, a guy came in and asked if the dining room was open, and Billy hit him over the head with the statue."
And there's some irony, of course, in using violence with the Buddha statue.
The symbol of peace and harmony. Yeah. But it worked.
But you sent a message to anybody else who would barrel in.
It was kind of a lawless area. You're kind of encouraged to take care of things yourself. There was a big man found in a large load clothes dryer at the laundromat. He had passed on. There weren't any cops because there wasn't a real town there. So they came down from Jeff City, state troopers, to investigate the situation. They didn't want to be down there. So they said it's a probable suicide, which left open the question, how did this guy get the quarters in the machine to kill himself?
Yeah, there'd be some suspicion there.
But the family said, that's okay, we'll take care of it. So it's like the hills.
Right.
Yeah, it was take care.
Well, yeah, I think if people went there, they go to Lake of the Ozarks today, they would see something that doesn't even resemble the place you went, because it was rural and weird and quirky, and some of the stops along the way before you got to the Arrowhead Lodge. Some of the big tourist traps that you write about
those were good.
In the book. For example, the monkeys on bicycles was a big attraction.
Cars. They drove cars.
Oh, the monkeys drove cars.
Tom's Monkey Jungle. They drove cars. And that was very
so extraordinary
to see it. And back in those days, we were simpler folk. We hadn't been to Disney World or any of these places and seen these roller coasters that come down out of the sky at 60 miles an hour upside down. So we were real happy. We were thrilled to see it. We saw a 5-legged deer. It was nothing to sneeze at. And it was, there were lots of these places leading up that gave you the strong sense that you were not in Nantucket.
There was also extraordinarily, I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more press, the one place on Earth where gravity does not apply.
That's right. Gravity, called the mystery spot. It was on the strip of amusement things after the dam. And the guy who ran it, Al something, he explained it that a meteorite had come down and hit right by the highway. Back far enough to allow parking out in front. I've looked that up. There was no gravity there. So people, when you go in, I'd look at you and you'd be standing, I don't know how they did that. You'd be standing sideways. And I don't know how they did that. And water flowed uphill.
Water flowed uphill?
It did. I saw it. I know people think I'm crazy. It sounds like a modern day conspiracy theory or something, UFO story.
And the meteor had that impact to reverse.
Normally a meteor, I've looked that up since, a meteorite normally leaves a huge crater where it landed. Luckily it didn't leave any crater.
It could open right up with a gift shop right after it struck.
I don't know if the gift shop was there already. It might have been.
So what was it like to go back a few years ago to see Lake of the Ozarks when Arrowhead Lodge has now been torn down? That big famous sign isn't there anymore. It
was so different, so changed that I didn't even get teary-eyed or anything. It was just so different. They rerouted the interstate so that it went around the lake kind of. You didn't even go by Arrowhead Lodge, the main road. So there was that. And stuff down at the dam was all like tattoo parlors, and there was nothing fun and ingenious about some of the things they came. One thing I liked so much about being down there were all the characters you'd meet, the people who came up with the idea of the mystery spot. And Larry Albright was the souvenir king. He had some great ideas. His dream, which I don't think he ever got a chance to fulfill, was to give rare Ozark seal tours.
I didn't realize there were seals.
No, I didn't either. It's all crazy. You don't understand a lot of it. But he was going to give tours to see Ozark seals, and I said, well, how would you do that? He'd say, get youngsters in brown suits of some kind and swim around.
And with a seal head on?
I don't know. They must have had something on their head. But you can pay him $1 an hour.
And he never went through with that?
No, he never. World War built a window in the bottom of the boat so you could see the sunken city of, what was it?
Right, but you couldn't quite see.
No, you couldn't see anything.
No.
But he said if you couldn't see anything, buy a drawing of it in the gift shop.
But these were the kind of innovators who you came to appreciate.
A lot of them were guys who, World War II veterans, some of them, they come back and they didn't want to sit in an office and push paper, and they wanted to get out and do something, be on their own, do things, and they did some crazy things.
When you said you went back and you didn't even recognize it, so you couldn't get teary-eyed,
yeah.
I like what you write in the book where you say Arrowhead Lodge had become the place that didn't belong at the lake, where it was just the opposite when you were there.
When it was first built, it seemed like the only place that belonged down there because there were trees and wood and all that kind of stuff. And now that everything was kind of gone, and it just Pete to the lodge site now. And so it really was, the lodge didn't really belong there anymore. It did when they built it, but no more.
And you got together with some of the characters in this book and told old war stories?
Yeah, some are going to be surprised to see their names in the book. I haven't sent them all copies yet. We had cross-cultural exchange programs, and Pete took a girl to drive in. I think he's going to be surprised to see his name in there.
Uh-oh, I hope there's not too much detail about Pete in there. So what I love about the book is that it's funny. All these stories that we've been talking about are hilarious. But even for me as your son, getting to the end of it, I went, oh, that's where this all started for him. That's where he fell in love with weird guys like the Mystery Spot and the monkeys driving the cars. And you had an affinity for them. And it created your sense of humor, but also gave you your career. Those are the kind of stories you frustrated.
Better or worse, I did hundreds of pieces on crazy entrepreneurs around the country. In this country, overseas, everywhere. I searched them out. And that was, I didn't really realize it until I wrote the book. You pointed out to me one day, this looks like you made a whole career out of this. And I realized, maybe where it started, for better or worse.
Well, when you see the contrast, too, of the first years of your life where you're almost a frustrated, funny guy with no outlet for it, and nobody could appreciate your jokes, and they'd roll their eyes at you. And then it was almost like you stepped through a portal into Lake of the Ozarks, and people were laughing at the jokes.
Uncle Ed and Aunt Janet thought it was very funny. They took me to Acapulco once a winter, sort of amusement. But yeah, everybody thought it was funny, and I'd think of funny things to say before I'd get places, and it was great.
So do you look back at Lake of the Ozarks as the beginning of something for you?
I hadn't thought that, but because I really didn't have the appreciation for it. And yeah, I think it was the beginning. It was the beginning of something that lasted my whole life. I don't know if that's good or bad.
It's good. Worked out pretty well. We talked about when the cook would be passed out by the pool, and you go in and have to cook. But when you weren't cooking, you were back there washing dishes.
Extreme dishwashing.
Extreme dishwashing, and there were so many, and they were coming in so fast. Let's just say you guys weren't meticulous as craftsmen.
No, we were doing what we could to move the dishes. And so Weezer and my friend, would put on towels on our heads and stuff. I was Larry of Arabia, and he was Saudi, my friend. And so we'd wash dishes, and we thought you had to really get pumped up to do this because there were so many coming in. It was kind of a tsunami of dishes came through. They put them on the rack, and pretty soon, all of a sudden, you were overwhelmed. And you look down the dishwasher, it was that color, and it had stuff floating around in it.
And you're washing it in that water?
Well, yeah, and we had to change the water, and that put us another 7 or 8 minutes behind.
Right.
So people were putting stuff on the trash can. Then eventually, we started putting them on the floor and kicking the dishes under the
just to slow things down a little bit.
Well, we were just trying to get some breathing room. We were kicking the dishes under the wash tubs, and we had one guy who went crazy back there, and he'd throw the dishes in the big trash barrel and hit them with a kitchen sweeper.
Oh,
a broom.
Yeah.
He'd take a broom handle and smash them in the.
Wow.
It was just too much.
He'd had enough, right?
We were overtaxed.
It could break a man,
Yeah, it did. It broke him.
I also like that sometimes the traffic was so fast in the kitchen that there'd be. We were talking also for their meal.
Yeah.
And you might just fish some off one plate and get it onto another one.
I've seen that happen.
We can say it now, the lodge is
String
closed.
beans and broccoli, yeah. Vegetables might find themselves, if they're at the top of the trash barrel, they might be rinsed off and put back on a plate. Especially if they're some of the last customers of the evening.
Sure, right.
Yeah, they had to expect that.
And they'd been there a long night. They're not going to even taste it anyway.
Yeah.
We were talking also about your bellhop years.
Oh, yeah.
And what you had to do to get those tips, even if they were a dime here and there. Did you have any tricks?
Well, as I said, we went to $1 a day because we had tips. We're entitled to tips from people. But Ozarkian people they're not kind of hip to the whole tipping scene. They probably hadn't seen a bellhop ever before in their life. We're probably the only ones between St. Louis and Kansas City. So we had to develop techniques. I told you we'd try and get the suitcase out of the guy's hand. He wouldn't let it go. And so I'd look at bags, eventually get them, carry him downstairs to his room or upstairs. Upstairs if you wanted to avoid the garden floor. Yeah, I'd go down, take the bags into their room and drop them, and then I'd look at them. And they weren't looking at me, and they weren't kind of looking at the floor and looking around. I don't think they knew that they were...
They weren't even aware that the tip
I don't
was
think
a
they were
part
aware
of the
the
deal.
tips were part of the deal.
Yeah.
So I'd look at them, and when early on I'd leave and get mad. But later I'd stay in, later years I'd stay and say, is your TV working okay? And I'd turn on the TV and all channels working. There were 2 channels. But you need more towels.
You know,
anything you could think of to stay in the room and stay at them. And then you just finally just stand there and stare at them. Usually the wife would get, Harold, give him some money.
Right.
And punch him in the ribs or something.
I think you were a pioneer in that. Uncle Ed brought it. If I've ever had somebody help me with the bags, they do now that you mention it.
Just stand there?
They go and they open the curtains.
Oh, yeah,
and they
yeah.
used to show you how the drawers work. Yeah, I know how the drawers work. And
That's
go,
very good.
I know why you're hanging around.
Very good.
Sorry.
See if the drawers work. Yeah, that's right. That's the kind of thing you'd ask them. The pool's right down at the end of the hall. We're open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. American plan or European plan. I didn't know what American plan and European plan were. But.
Is that Uncle Ed brought that back from
Yes, he
Europe,
did.
Right?
Yes, he did. That was one of his. Must have had that at one of the hotels where he had a headquarters.
So he had all the trappings of a fancy place. European plan, the
Yeah,
bellhop,
he had extra
all
things.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Extra. It was kind of. I think at one point, it was probably posh.
Right.
Early posh.
Right.
And then later on, by the time I left, they were building huge resorts and lodges.
You know, it's funny though. I bet now, because sort of the nostalgia and the throwback stuff is hip now. If we put in
sign the letter,
make it a little nice, but keep that same sign and all that, I bet it'd be considered like a cool place.
I used to
stay
think
at the
that.
lake.
I tried to get him to sell I'd put out on the sign, the letters you put on the sign, I'd say, fine dining in a rustic setting.
There you go.
No, he didn't like that.
Rustic
Nobody
wasn't
bought it. No, it wasn't what you put up there. You put prime rib, $5.95.
Right. Yours was a little too vague.
Yeah, I think he was had it.
I want to ask you too, because we were talking about drawing a line from the Lake of the Ozarks through the rest of your life, and you finding your sense of humor there and finding your career there. But you also can kind of credit the Lake of the Ozarks with finding your wife and your mother, because she thought you were funny.
Yeah.
And you met at the University of Illinois, and she came up to you in a bar and said, what?
She was kind of a Marlene Dietrich kind of thing. She had this cigarette. She didn't even smoke. When your sister, beautiful blonde woman, kind of woman I've always wanted to go out with and everything. And so that started because her parents were both funny. And they taught her that the most important thing in finding a person to marry is their sense of humor. And that's all I had. So I was good with that. So that, I do credit that a little bit. And I go on to say, you and your sister are funny people, and the grandkids are I said they're funny as hell at the end. Lucy, George,
Billy and Russ,
they're all funny.
And Mom had been reading those weird poems
you
were writing?
Yeah, I was writing poems. I didn't know anybody saw them. Somebody told me they were putting them up on telephone poles and stuff. I had no idea that happened. I just wrote them in my room.
So you must have been shocked to see the beautiful blonde woman with a cigarette.
Yeah. I love your
You know what
work. I love your
about.
poetry. I said, what? I said, women who come up to me and say they like your poetry, they're really
Yeah.
just bad glasses.
Yeah. And you weren't a poet on top of it.
No.
So you didn't know what she was. None of it made sense to you.
Well, they did rhyme.
They're in the book.
Yeah.
They're funny. So Uncle Ed didn't really adhere to the customer service philosophy that the guest is always right.
No, he didn't.
If a guest was unruly or annoying, how would he deal with that?
They didn't even have to be unruly. One of them carried a watermelon through the lobby. It was dripping. My aunt saw that and said, "You're out of here." She told Ed to throw him out. He'd always come out and say, "Get out of my hotel." He'd always call my hotel. And he was just a very tough guy, and the help, we always thought he was tough on us. But if he went out to the pool and some guest complained, said, your help is using the pool. Say, why don't you get out of my hotel? Because he was sticking up for the help.
Yeah.
People. So he was just a tough guy. He wanted to be him. Friend and foe alike, he would go after him.
I have a vision of him with a scotch and maybe a cigar.
Yeah.
Going up and yelling at the guest to get the hell out of his hotel. It isn't really what you're used to seeing these days.
No.
From the GM of the hotel.
No. That's not hospitality school.
It's not.
Yeah, hospitality. Yeah. Isn't that what they call it, the hospitality industry?
Yes.
No, he wouldn't have made it there.
No, he wouldn't have made
But
it.
a lot of people wanted to be him who worked there, my friends and stuff, and they'd go back to school at universities that had hotel management schools, and they'd teach them all this stuff that you just can't teach this.
Yeah. We've talked about this a lot, but you took us back there. It was the summer of, when we went back, it was the summer of 1991. So I was 16.
Wow.
And remember how hot it was that summer?
It was blazing.
Wouldn't get out of
hot.
the car because it was so hot.
It was terrible.
And but I got to get a little taste of it. I was the age you were when you started going. I met some of these characters, and I met Doc Justice, who had the white Corvette.
He was a playboy who came down every Friday night.
And so yeah, what was he like back
Kansas.
then?
He was great. He always had scantily clad women on top of his houseboat.
Oh,
And I thought they were blow-up dolls from a distance, because he can't have the same scene every weekend. But he was great. He had 50-cent tipper, which was good.
ooh, that's big.
And he kind of flip it to you.
Yeah,
And he came down. He was like kind of the world's first playboy, or one of the original playboys. He was a doctor in Kansas, and he'd drive down every Friday night.
yeah. And when I met him, he had the white Corvette.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, what a cool car. And he said, well, come on. And I said, this is great, Dad. I'm going to go for a ride in the Corvette with Doc Justice.
Yeah.
And he said, the hell you're going for a ride? And he threw me the keys to the Corvette. I didn't have a driver's license. And I said, is this okay? And he said, that was cool for me.
Kind of the devil may
your
care
world.
attitude that is down there. Lawless. Nobody thought about getting in trouble. Well, I'd say there weren't any cops because they didn't have a town. But that was very, very true to the atmosphere around it. We drank and served drinks when we were 15, 16 years old.
Yeah, there are several incidents in the book where I go, oh my gosh, I wonder how they handled it. And you said, we would have called the cops if there had been any. there was some 911. Nobody to call.
Ambulance.
So no. Just kind of like, just gonna let nature take its course.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Which is great. I liked a lot about that. We seem very controlled now, and probably not so much as I think, but it had nothing to do with the way I was raised down there.
There's a great scene in the book later where after you've gone to Vietnam, you're coming home, and it's Uncle Ed.
Oh, it touched me because
Strong Uncle Ed.
That moves me now when you say it. In the airport, he was moved down to Florida, and he and my aunt were at the gate. You could go to the gate then before 9/11, way before, and he was shedding a tear at the gate for me. And I thought, gee whiz, it really touched me because I'd never seen him even close to shedding a tear over anybody.
And what do you think that was about?
I think we were really close. I think there are a couple things. One is my namesake was killed in World War II, William Geist, and that was my aunt's brother. And the other thing, I think we just were very close. He liked me, and they were relieved that I was home, and I was just happy to be home. I wasn't relieved, but
He was worried about you.
yeah, he was.
But you couldn't conceive of Uncle Ed in tears before that.
No, never.
Driving around the car with a scotch and a cigar.
No, exactly. I missed
that
that on going to the bank. There was a scotch and water in the center console, and it left
the cover.
And Pierre, his black poodle, his ears flapping out from the air conditioning, looking into the front seat.
Man, that's a visual.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about the cover? Because this is my favorite cover of any of your books.
Me too.
Is that based on a postcard from that era?
Yeah, it kind of is. It has that look. It even feels a little bit like a postcard.
Yeah, it's got the
I
texture.
recommend everybody buy it and put the cover up in their room, frame
Sure.
it, frame it. You can throw the book out.
And that's the dam itself right there.
That's Bagnell Dam. Yeah.
You still talk about going down to the dam. You call places that aren't dams, like beaches.
Yeah,
We're going to
yeah.
the dam this weekend? It just means we're going somewhere happy.
I do.
That I
And
like.
we go out to Long Island.
Going to the dam. Congrats, Dad.
Thanks.
Love you.
Love you too.
My dad's book, Lake of the Ozarks, is in stores now, online, wherever you get your books. Thanks to all of you for checking
The issues.
of the Sunday Sit Down podcast. If you like what you hear, be sure to check out our library of guests and click subscribe so you never miss an episode. And of course, don't forget to tune in to Sunday Today every weekend on NBC. I'm Willie Geist. We'll see you back here next week on the Sunday Sit Down podcast.
Hey, it's Chris Hayes. You know, sometimes it's good to just take a step back from the day-to-day onslaught of news and take a broader look at the issues. That's what I'm doing each week on my podcast, Why Is This Happening? We're exploring topics ranging from school segregation to climate change.
Well, the way that I think of it is climate change will be to the 21st century what modernity was to the 19th century. It'll be the central subject of questions about economic justice. Everything that you care about in the world will be affected by climate.
And digging deep with guests uniquely qualified to analyze issues from mass incarceration to race relations.
As you know, for the first time in our history at the national level, whites are on the verge of losing their majority status in 20 years. And I think